What's up, everybody? BananaCrapshoot here with Space Arena Ground Arena. Something I wanted to do at the end of the set is a tier list based on how I see how things shook out over Store Showdown season and other events leading up to that. A bunch of the various 1Ks, SCG events, the PPG event. Just overall where things ended up, and then we can maybe see how healthy or unhealthy the meta was as a result. So I'm going to go from just right across the list on the bottom, starting with each leader. And then I'm curious if my co-hosts on the podcast will do something similar, so that we get like 3 different tier lists from us. And people love tier lists, so here we go. We're going to start off with Director Krennic. Krennic, I think, has one really good deck that he plays in, and that's with Command. I don't think he's as good in the other aspects, but he is really good in the Command aspect. Um, I'm going to put him in the B tier since he did take down a couple events, so he's definitely competitively viable, but he's really only good in that one deck. So I think he's B tier because you can win with him, but he's a little limited in his scope. Now Iden also has took down some events. I think she's a little more flexible in that she can play in some other aspect combinations better than Krennic. I think Krennic plays command better than Iden, but she's also good in aggression and mono more than Krennic is, I think. Their abilities, they want to do similar things and heal. Krennic, his advantage is he has 7 health, so he doesn't get removed as easily. And Iden has potential for a lot more healing. So I think Iden will slop in at A because she does play in three decks very well. And Krennic really only plays in one deck very well. Next up, we have Chewbacca. I really like Chewbacca. So does my co-host Kennedy Hawk. Chewbacca can top events. He can play pretty well in, I think, 2 aspects he's very good in, and then another one he's okay in. I think Chewbacca is one of the leaders to watch out for in future sets. I think Chewbacca is a B tier also. You can win with him. He's pretty solid, but he is pretty underwhelming in the control mirrors because he doesn't have as good of a top end as the villain control decks do. Um, Next up, we have Chirrut. Chirrut again is really only good in one deck currently at the moment that I see. Like you can play in mono pretty good. That aggression with the force throw in Tarkin Town can be pretty solid. You can definitely win some events with Chirrut. I think he's pretty narrow. I think he's also um, B tier hero. So far, 3 B tiers and 1 A tier. But yeah, Chirrut, it's fun to play, but he's really limited, I think, to aggression right now because the reason he's so good is he's really good with force throw because he enables it early. So yeah. Next up, we have Luke. Luke is another vigilance leader hero where he is pretty good, and I think he's pretty well rounded. I think he can make a viable deck in any aspect. Combination with Luke, I think he's just really solid overall. Doesn't have a ton of terrible matchups. So I think uh, Luke belongs in this A tier, in my opinion. He's pretty strong um, all around. Doesn't have really any bad matchups. So a tier for Luke. Next up, we have Palpatine. Palpatine is a leader that I think will get better as we get more sets. You can definitely win with Palp. I think he has some flexibility in his aspect pairings, but I think because he deploys so late, um, he is definitely slow. So you really want to do the ramp game with him right now. So we'll see what that looks like in later sets. But I think he's B tier because he's a solid leader, but he's just a little slow and he's got some really bad matchups into a lot of the aggro decks. Whereas like Krennic and Iden aren't as bad into the aggro matchups. Next up, we have Tarkin. Tarkin's a fun leader. He obviously you're very limited to playing Imperials. You can probably build 2 aspects pretty solid with mono and aggression, and then you can also do vigilance, and you have access to some good Imperial units and some better removal. So Tarkin, though he's fun to play. I think he really excels in limited right now because there's a lot of Imperial in the limited card pool for set one. Um, I think Tarkin's fun. I think he is solid and limited, but this is more of a set one constructed premier focus thing. So I'm gonna have to say he's C tier because he just doesn't punch uh like some of these other leaders do. I just think he's kind of he's made for draft and sealed in my opinion, and he's not. You don't hardly ever hear about Tarkin making top eight at any of these events. I just think he's not as competitively viable as these other leaders. Next up, we have Hera. Hera is another one where she's locked into a certain tribal with specters. She's another one that is fun. She kind of breaks deck building, but she doesn't do much on her front side. Front side's kind of blank, whereas all these other heroes, leaders, do something on their front side. I think again, kind of like Tarkin, she's fun. She's fun to play. It's cool theme with her. She's definitely not as competitively viable as these other leaders. She's one of my favorite decks to play just because it's fun doing the whole Spectre thing, and when it hits, it hits. Um, but there's too many games where it just doesn't hit. Next up, we have Leia. She is a very solid aggro leader. I think she's fun because she does the action cheating thing a little bit, where she allows you to compress some of your actions together. He is very solid in one or two decks, but she's not too good outside of like aggression and mono, but she is solid at what she does. So I think she's kind of probably the top of B tier because I think people have figured her out pretty much. Um, Early on, there was a lot of people like Sabine or Leia, and I think it's clearly Sabine is the aggro queen, and Leia is just not as good outside of the aggro. And I think you can control Leia a little more than Sabine. Sabine's a little more inevitable. But I think Leia's a lot of fun, and anytime we get Rebel cards, you're gonna have to take a look at Leia in an aggro deck because of how she plays out. So that was it for the command leaders. Moving into aggression, we have the other starter leader in Darth Vader. Darth Vader plays pretty solid into probably three of the four aspects. He won like the biggest event we've had so far for Star Wars Unlimited. He is a boss monster. He's the scariest leader when he deploys, and I think he's right up there with Luke and Iden in that A tier. Just super solid, very strong, and doesn't really have too many bad matchups. He can get so since he deploys late. If you're fast enough, you can get underneath of him. But I think he's pretty solid all around. Next up, Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor is fun in every aspect, really. There's four different decks you could build with him that all feel a little different, but they want to do the same thing. He lacks, I think, some support. I think he'll be better in set two than he is in set one. But I think he's right there in that B tier because he's pretty solid. He can top some events. He can definitely steal games. He has a pretty good matchup into Sabine in two of his aspects. So I think you can definitely take some games with him. So we'll put him right in the B tier there. Next up, we have IG-88, just going to the D tier. He just doesn't have support in set one. I think he's kind of made to excel in Twin Suns. I think that's a better fit for him. But he's blank a lot of the time. He's just not very good. Next up, we have Cassian. Cassian's going to go in that C tier. I think he has potential, but he just doesn't. There right now, there's no reason to play him over Sabine. A lot of these other characters in the same aspect, you can make a reason to or an argument to play them over another one like Krennic and Iden. You can have that discussion, like Luke and Chewie and Chirrut. Like you can have that discussion and why you're playing one or the other. There's really no reason to play Cassian right now. Um, his ability seems like it should be good. He just doesn't have the support, maybe. In set two, it gets better, but right now I just don't think you have much of a reason. But he's definitely not as bad as IG88. So he's in the bottom of that C tier. Next up, we have Sabine. Sabine's gonna be our first S tier. She plays good in, I think, all four aspects. You can make good decks with her. She's pretty solid overall. In the meta, has won a bunch of events. I don't think there's any argument that she's not S tier. Then next we have Boba Fett. Boba Fett again goes right in that S tier. Has won a bunch of events. Is good in all four aspects. Can win any event he's in. Super solid. So moving on, we'll see him. Thrawn. Thrawn, I think it goes in that C tier. He's really solid control leader. Plays good in two or three of the aspects. Really strong control leader, but he's very slow. He plays a very slow game, so that's something you have to keep in your mind. Next up, we have Han. Han, this might be the hot take, but I think Han's S tier. I think he's right up there with Sabine and Boba Fett, and that he can win any event he's in. He plays good in probably three out of the four aspects really well. He has good matchups into a lot of these other decks that we've been talking about. He's really good in a Sabine. He's really solid in a Boba Fett, and he can be really good into control. I think he's just really solid all around. I think he's the harder of these three decks to pilot. I think his takes a little bit more of a skill. He's more of a skill check than Sabine or Boba Fett, in my opinion. But I think Han is right up there with Sabine and Boba Fett. He hasn't won as many events as the other two, but um, I think he's just as strong and can win any event that he's in. And the last up, we have Jin. Uh, Man, Jin is I I think she belongs. I think she's a little bit better than IG88, but I don't think she's. These other four leaders are definitely better than her. I think she's just slow. She's slow. She's not that impactful when she deploys. Her front side ability feels like it's blank most of the time anyway. Um, I don't think she's that great. I think these other four above her are definitely better. Um, like if I was in a draft and I had Jin, like Jin's pretty good in limited. Like she can be good in limited and sealed when you're not a constructed environment, but this is a constructed tier list. So I gotta put her in the D tier. So for my list, I got three S tier heroes. We'll go Sabine, Boba Fett, and Han. Then we have Luke, Vader, and Iden at A tier. And then B tier, we have Leia, Palpatine, Krennic, Chewie, Grand Inquisitor. C tier, Tarkin, Hera, Cassian, Thrawn, and then the D tier is Jin and IG88. So that is my winding down set one, moving into set two. Like for me, my store showdown season's over, so I'm starting to look at season two. So starting to build some season two deck or set two decks. So set one's kind of sunsetting for me personally. So this felt like a good time to take a look back and do like a set one tier list in retrospect. So this is where mine ends up. Let me know what you agree or disagree with, and we will see you in the arenas.